Today on Diabetes Connections Type 2, it's pretty clear that the future of medicine will include artificial intelligence. It's already part of doctor's appointments, health data, and more. But balancing that machine learning, high tech, with a doctor's personal touch is going to be tricky. This week, we're talking about the art of medicine with endocrinologist and author Dr. Alan Sussman. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Hello and welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections Type 2. I am your host, Stacey Sims, and I am always so glad to have you here. I had to laugh a little bit knowing that I was doing this episode this week. A couple of days ago, I was at the vet. My dog was having some ongoing eye issues. She's 10 years old, and this is going to be with her forever. But the vet asked me, hey, we use some AI here now. Do you mind if I record this conversation? Because it takes much better notes and it summarizes in a way that's much better for me. And then her assistant, she says, can just spend more time taking care of the real life animals and not transcribing on computer notes. And I was like, yes, absolutely, no problem. So she did that. And she sent me a follow-up email with everything summarized and bullet points and next steps. And, I haven't had this happen at a people doctor yet, but I know it is coming. We all know that generative AI and other forms of machine learning are being used in our healthcare, and it is truly just the beginning. I'm curious if you have a real-life example of how this has affected your healthcare or your doctor's visits. Reach out to me. I would love to hear from you on this or any topic. You can find me, Stacey, at diabetes-connections.com or on any social channel. And I mentioned last week, we're on YouTube now. So if you like to consume your podcasts that way, we do have a YouTube channel. These aren't video podcasts. They are all audio, but you can listen through YouTube. It's a very big way that people listen to podcasts. And I'm really glad to be there. I want to make it easy for you to listen wherever it is, whatever platform you want to use. In this discussion today, we are going to mention HIPAA. So I thought it'd be a really good time to define just what that is. We all think we know, but it's very complicated. So HIPAA, which is HIPAA, is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. This is a federal law that required the creation of national standards to protect sensitive patient health information from being disclosed without your consent or your knowledge. Before HIPAA, the health insurance industry was regulated, but it was a mixture of state and federal laws. So most commercial group health plans were governed by state laws. Most employer-sponsored and individually purchased health plans were subject to federal law and COBRA. I'm not going to go into all of the complexity there, but it did create a scenario where you risked losing your health insurance benefit if you changed jobs, even if you worked for the same company, but you moved to a different state. So HIPAA was created to resolve this by increasing the portability of health insurance between jobs. There are a few parts to it. The privacy rule addresses the use and disclosure of your health information by healthcare providers and by health plans. It also lets you as an individual control how your health information is used. The big goal here is to make sure your health information is protected while allowing the flow of information needed, right, to provide and promote, as they say, high-quality healthcare and to protect the public's health and well-being. The privacy rule permits important uses of information while protecting your privacy. That scratches the surface of HIPAA. It is complicated. It is dense. I'm going to link up a very good guide from the CDC that I think has a lot of plain language around here. So if you'd like to learn more, definitely check that out. Links in the show notes. My guest this week is the author of a new book, Saving the Art of Medicine. Alan Sussman was a board-certified endocrinologist in private practice for 34 years. He was a clinical assistant professor at the University of Washington, and he was involved in hundreds of studies, and he was involved in the development of groundbreaking technology for the treatment of diabetes, and his resume goes on and on. Our conversation is right after this. US Med sets the bar high when it comes to diabetes care. US Med excels in customer satisfaction, ranking number 1 in Dexcom customer surveys. And online, they're number 1 in Google and Facebook customer ratings among large national diabetes DMEs. With over 1 million satisfied diabetes customers since 1996, they've perfected the art of delivering better service and better care. From insulin pumps to diabetes testing supplies and the latest CGMs like Freestyle Libre 2 and the Dexcom G6, they've got you covered. Plus, they accept Medicare nationwide and collaborate with over 800 private insurers. US Med, your trusted partner in diabetes care. Your health, satisfaction, and peace of mind are their priority. Visit usmed.com/Stacey. That's usmed.com/STACEY. Dr. Sussman, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so interested to talk about this. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
When I saw the book, what really stood out to me here, knowing you're an endocrinologist, is the term the art of medicine. Because when my son was diagnosed a long time ago, we were told by our endocrinologist at the time, like, look, this is just as much art as it is medicine. And I'm curious, it's obviously about more than endocrinology, but could you kind of expand on what you mean by that?
Yes. Medicine is a combination of science and art. And actually, if you look at the history of medicine, it was basically art until almost just 100 years ago. The science was relatively meager and not well coherently done. The art means the human relationship, the subjective part of medicine. Some of it can be intuitive, and it's beyond the evidence-based part, the part that's supposed to be objective. And actually, in my book, I try to say even the objective is not completely objective. And the need for everyone to work together, and particularly the ideas of human relationship, of how physicians and patients react to each other. And that includes the physicians needing to have humility and not have all the answers, but listen to the patient as well as the patient listen to the doctor. And that it is a communication that's very important that needs to be developed.
It's interesting to read and to look at your experience because you have been an endocrinologist for a long time. A lot of folks listening may remember the days of testing diabetes with urine, right? Only, no blood sugar meters, certainly no
Correct.
home meters. And it looks like over the years, thankfully, the testing, the evidence-based stuff has gotten better and better and better. This is going to sound like a very silly question, but I'll kind of set it up this way. So why do we still need the art if the science is so much better?
Well, the science is much better, but again, we have to realize it's not perfect. And the information that you get is a guideline, is a way of going that is continually getting more refined, but there are rough edges to it at all the times. And as I would talk with patients and give them the ins and outs of dozens of studies about saying, go this way, go that way, this works, that works, and then their eyes start crossing as they start getting overwhelmed by the amount of information that's there. And I look at them, I take a deep breath, and I say, you take a deep breath and just realize that a lot of the information I give you will change over the next 5 years. Some of it might not even be accepted anymore. But the one thing we will have is our continued relationship, which hopefully will get even stronger. And I think most people realize the need of being together with other people and how important that is in even the therapeutic ends of medicine. And that if you have a doctor who is very dry, let's say, and just gives information, that is not considered exactly what you usually want. You want to be able to relate to the doctor so that they understand you. And understanding is a question of whether AI is eventually going to understand patients or whether they're just going to be a means of providing a lot of information that can be very helpful and assist doctors. But having meaning to what's going on occurs during relationship. And I think that'll always be important.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk to you about AI. But let's stay on that patient-doctor relationship in the first couple of years. With diabetes, many times, someone will get diagnosed and it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information, there's so much to do. And then you get home and there's so much that's thrown at you from, social media and television ads, eat this, don't eat that, wear this, don't wear that, take this medicine, no, take this medicine.
Yes.
What do you tell folks in the very beginning? And let's focus on type 2. What do you tell people in the beginning of their diabetes diagnosis?
Well, let's say It's someone comes in to the office and they're just overwhelmed with the idea that they have diabetes. They've done maybe some reading and maybe they've read a lot of negative parts of it and they're starting to feel doom and gloom. And I said, you don't have to look at it as doom and gloom. You could also look at it as a blessing in the sense that now you will be more aware of how you should lead your life and be healthy. And quite frankly, if you do what you can possibly do to help yourself, you very well are going to be more healthy than the person down the street who is not taking care of themselves. So taking care of yourselves can be an extraordinarily important part of of how you will do in life.
Let me ask you this as a follow-up, doctor. Taking care of yourself is the name of the game, right? As you say, you have better outcomes, all of that. We know that. But what does taking care of yourself mean? I have talked to a lot of people with diabetes over the years, and I feel like take care of yourself almost sets up an impossible goal because we can never be perfect at that. So I know a lot of people who feel like, well, if I'm not working out every day, if I'm not eating the best that I can every day, then I'm not taking care of myself. But that's not really what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. As I have in my book, there's a cartoon from
Hmm.
Pearl and Swine that talks about diet. And you have different panes of the comic strip. And in one, it says, do not eat meat because you'll shorten your life. Another one will say, eat meat, otherwise you won't live as long. Vegetables are good, vegetables aren't. And they just have a group of more of different information suggesting that whatever you do can be contraindicated. At which point, the main character is spinning in their head, fall on the ground, and die. And they said, and stress killed him.
God. But that's
So,
it.
yeah, so I agree completely with what you're saying is that, information's important, but ultimately stress is what is going to be the most negative factor that can occur in your life and how you lead your life, in the way you think and in the way you are, the way you be. You have to learn how to so-called roll with the punches. And quite frankly, one thing I also try to emphasize in the book is humor and laughter is important. Don't try to be perfect. You can't be perfect. I know I never was perfect. So don't try to go towards being perfect. Just try doing what seems to be reasonable. And sometimes what is reasonable to you is not reasonable to someone else. And that can be the doctor. And that isn't the question that you have to always succumb to what the doctor says, but you should think about what is being said and feel what works out best in your lifestyle. And lifestyles are not perfect. Let me give one example of a patient who I saw since he was a teenager. This is a type 1 patient who was on insulin, and he moved from out of state into Washington, where I live and practice. And he had been traumatized throughout a group of years because of social disrest in his family, divorce, and he ended up having several episodes of diabetic ketoacidosis, which many of your viewers will understand is a very serious condition. So he would be hospitalized, he would be poked and prodded continually while he was there. To when I saw him, when he moved up to Washington, he was taking his insulin, but he refused to test his blood sugars.
Mm.
He just would not do that. And I had compassion for him in the sense that from what he had gone through in his life, this was one area how he felt he was getting control over his life, maybe not in a smart way, but in a way that felt better for him.
Right.
Now, I felt it was important to accept that with him and talk about what you can do. And that was lifestyle. That was a question of how we ate, eat regularly, watch the amount of carbs that you have, the type of carbs you have, all the dietary maneuvers that we talk about. And I saw him for years. But while we went through this, I continually, every visit would start with, are you testing yet?
Mm.
And after about a year, he would start talking before I would and say, no, I'm not. So I never even had a chance to even ask the question. And we did this for years. Eventually, he got married. He had a child. and his diabetes was relatively well controlled. Again, the problem with not testing blood sugars is not only a question of the highs that you can have, but if you're trying to control things at all tightly, of not having any severe lows. He didn't have any severe lows. His diabetic control was adequate, while not perfect. And then he came in after he and his wife had a child. He came in the next time, and the first thing he said to me, I'm testing now. So it's a question of patience over time for someone, and realizing that, was he doing things perfectly? No. But quite frankly, I'm not certain if it's not better for him to really be working on lifestyle and what he's eating, and not testing than testing and not watching his lifestyle at all.
It's amazing. As you listen, you may be horrified by, what you just heard. Like, oh my God, he wasn't testing for years. And obviously that's not the way to go. But I have talked to so many people, especially when finger sticking was the only option. They do suffer from burnout. They do get these phases of life where they just feel like it's all I can do to get the insulin into my body. And that has to be enough for now. So it's amazing that you met him where he was, until he was in a better place to do things like that. And I'm sure it was the birth of his child that really helped him, as well as your care, get to a good place. But what about when you have a doctor who's not willing to meet you like that? I have, and it's not as dramatic a case, but I have a friend, an adult. He's middle-aged. I mean, I want to be clear about the age here, but he was recently diagnosed with type 2, and his doctor doesn't want to give him a CGM. He just wants him to finger stick for a while. There was no real time limit given, I guess. And I encouraged him to push back on that. But I'm curious, what's your advice when your doctor, obviously this is not my doctor, but what's your advice when your own doctor is really doing something or not doing something that you think is vital for your care? I mean, I know a lot of people would say, like, fire your doctor, find a new doctor, but sometimes that's just not possible.
Yes, well, it might not be, but again, I so strongly believe in human relationship and the way a doctor and a patient can work with each other. And I think you have to try to find the right doctor. Doesn't make them a bad doctor, but if you can maximize the human relationship, that is good and important. But in this particular case, I think it's important for the patient not to just succumb to what the doctor is saying, to really try to understand, to try to work together. And maybe, as what I did with this other patient over a long period of time, just keep on trying to get what you want if you feel you have no other option. But again, I think the best option is to try to find a doctor that you feel you relate to better. So I think that still is important. But otherwise, feel firm in your convictions, but try to be open-minded to trying to understand their point of view, the doctor's, as well as the doctor is important to understand the patient's point of view. And then it's that combination of where the two meet, of trying to work for the care.
Right. We've talked a lot about human relationships. Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about where this is going. It has to be remarkable for somebody like yourself who has, been practicing medicine. You mentioned in the book, before computers were widely used in the office. So I'm not trying to date you here, but to this time where I must get a press release every day about AI in medicine, AI in diabetes. This is going to change everything. What's your take on this? And AI is it's such a broad catch-all. I know there's a lot of different things we could talk about. Let's start big. What do you think is going to happen here? I want to tell you about AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. It makes me feel like I'm doing something good for my body, right? I'm giving it the nutrition it craves. AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food-sourced nutrients. It helps you build your health foundation first. I get the travel packs so I don't have to miss a day, and it just tastes great. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/Stacey. That's drinkag1.com/STACEY. Check it out.
Okay. This AI with the so-called LLM, large language models, is life-changing for the planet, not just for medicine, but for almost every field. And with anything that's that important, there's a lot of potential for good, and then there's potential for bad. The good part of AI is that it can collate information that no human being can do by themselves. So you get the broader pictures, and all the potential possibilities are present or potentially present in the AI system. Now, the AI system can give a lot of information, but as I'm sure some of your viewers know, there is a thing called hallucination, where it can have so much information that it can develop a path of suggestions and way of looking at things that's not correct. That's hallucinating because it's taking a little bit here and there and going in another direction. So it's just an assistant in terms of how to use it at present. Maybe that will get better in time. It probably will. The AI that I look at as being the most important is in terms of the mechanisms of how a medical practice works, which requires a lot of information being transferred all the time, starting at input when the doctor is with the patient. And right now, very often, it's a threesome. It's the doctor, the computer, and the patient, with the computer between the patient and the doctor. I'm hoping that can be gotten rid of by AI being in the room, but not between the patient and the doctor, but to the side, basically transcribing, listening and transcribing all the information that is being said in the visit, and then collating it in a very reasonable fashion to make a note of the visit that reflects well what went on in the visit. This will allow the doctor and the patient to be more connected with each other. And I think that's a tremendous positive part, as well as that having insurances involved in getting certification for various different devices that can be given to the patient but have to go through paperwork can be done a lot more smoothly without requiring a lot of extra time, man hours of the office. So I think it can streamline medicine and increase the chance of better relationship occurring. And then information that's there will be tremendous, but it will always need to be looked at with some sort of sense of review in mind. This is information, and all the information it's using, let's say, is evidence-based medicine, and the evidence-based medicine is good, sometimes better, sometimes not as good, but needs to be nuanced.
It's funny. I have so many questions. When you talk about using AI in that way, to be in the room with the patient and the provider, it just makes so much sense. It sounds so streamlined, but I know it also sounds scary to a lot of people who think, I don't want that machine listening to me, right? A computer will have my data. What about HIPAA? When I talk to my doctor, I know I can trust my doctor. I don't know. It seems as though what's the expression? The horse has left the barn on that one. Are you reassured that it's going to be okay in a situation like that?
You're bringing up a very important point, and HIPAA is involved with that, as you well know. To me, it still seems as though it can be done relatively easily by, this is something to help, and can help a lot, but I think the patient has every right to say, I don't want it recorded. Mm. Well, you then turn it off. I don't think you can get quite as good a result, but I could understand that there can be some concern about that. And maybe there'll be other nuances of saying, we will record this one part because we're talking about your symptoms. I want to make sure I get it down right. But as soon as we start talking about what we're doing, I can turn it off and then turn it back on again. So I think they can work on ways of trying to nuance that to try to be able to get some benefit from it. But yes, I know that problem is going to be there, and it's going to be a big problem to deal with.
Bringing it back to where we started, though, I think AI is going to be absolutely fabulous if it can be woven together with, as you've already said, the person, the doctor who's helping you, the patient, who is willing to kind of work within that system. We're always going to need that art, as you mentioned. Is that the ideal that you would hope for? I mean, listen, we know we don't always get the ideal, so I don't want to be too Pollyannish about this, but that, to me, seems to be what we could be working for, right? A future where we take advantage of the evidence and the computers and all the tools, but we never lose the humanity, of doctors like you and of, like my son's great doctors. Is that the ideal?
I think it's the right path. Ideal is always hard to come by. But yes, I believe completely in science as being very important. And it's just made dramatic changes. As you've also said at the beginning, blood sugar testing, urine testing, the blood sugar testing was a mile difference between that. Of having the continuous glucose monitoring now, that's a tremendous advance in terms of being able to take care of yourself. And now, when you have all this information, what do you do with it? And as anyone who is on a continuous glucose monitor knows, you're not looking at all that information. You're not evaluating all that information. You're using that as you're going along at different parts of the day, let's say. So AI can very well help that further in terms of processing all the vast amount of information that's there into some formulation that might also be helpful to the patient. So yes, science is going to continue to be very helpful and necessary. But what I'm concerned about right now is that there's been an imbalance that's developed somewhat because of the institutionalization of medicine that puts everything towards numbers in the way of evaluating how patients are doing rather than how they really are doing. The care, or as Dr. Peabody said 100 years ago, the secret of the care of the patient is in the caring.
Well, what a great place to leave it. Dr. Sussman, thank you so much for joining me. Again, the book is Saving the Art of Medicine. We will link all of that up at diabetes-connections.com. I appreciate you spending some time with me. Thanks so much.
Oh, and thank you, Stacey. Enjoyed it.
I will link up more information about Dr. Sussman, where you can find his book as well. All of that information in the show notes. If you can't find that on whatever app you're listening to, or if you're on YouTube and you can't find it over there, head on over to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Type 2 show. You should be able to find it that way. Every episode has its own little homepage and blurb. And as always, reach out to me if you need more information. I'm Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. If you like what you are hearing on this show, we are still very new. This is only our 25th episode. I would love it if you could rate and review us on whatever podcast app you are listening to. That just helps clue other people into what kind of quality the show is. I would love a review from you, but rating is good too. The difference is for a review, you actually have to type something out. For a rating, you can just click 5 stars or whatever number of stars moves you. 2 easy ways to help other people find the show. Thanks, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.